Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala syarafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah. We are still discussing chapter 4 of our book, Positive Islamic Psychology, a transcendent model to achieve peace, happiness and success in the 21st century. And today we are discuss about this whole idea of classification of mental illnesses. So we have our own view in so far as positive Islamic psychology is concerned, how we view mental illnesses. That is the first guiding principle, because our view is a new worldview, or the traditional worldview, the primordial worldview, that we consist of our spirituality as a basis of existence. That means our reality is we are a spiritual being living in a physical existence. But the worldview of disease today, classification of disease, qualification of mental illnesses and so on, is based on the worldview that we are a material being, living and purely material being, and all manifestation of the disease is just a material thing. So that's where you have classification, for example, in DSM-5, in ICD and so on, where they classify diseases into major types. For example, they talk about, there are 200 classification. They talk about anxiety disorder, mood disorder, schizophrenia and psychotic, dementia, eating disorder, and the rest. So those classification under DSM-5, yes, it can be a baseline to use it, but is that the final classification? Where are we moving towards? Because now with the new science of epigenetics, those classification itself needs to be reviewed, because everything comes from a single source, and how this is being manifested will then affect that classification of that disease. So I just read some of the article here, two paragraph from Professor Muhammad Mahdi Jenkins about the classification of mental illnesses. Then we can form our own new classification in which we feel it will be useful, for example, to use it within the perspective of a believing society, a society that believes in God, a society that believes in spirituality, of our spiritual existence and so on. But this is something that is going to take a lot of research, a lot of work, but inshallah, if we can do that, we can then enhance. So what we are saying is not we are throwing the baby with the bathtub. If you have DSM-5, you have the ICDs, those classifications are good starting point. But if we can incorporate more of the value systems of understanding of our existence through epigenetics, through spirituality, through emotional, mental and physical realms of existence, then we would be able to have a different form of classification, because the root cause of everything from the perspective of Islam is imbalance. That means every disease is an imbalance of our fitrah, of our nature, and that you have to go into holistic medicine and Islamic healing and so on, which it is a long story to go, but let us just understand this classification of our worldview. Again, I'm saying we are not discounting DSM-5 as a basis in which we can use, for example, like diagnostic tools from DSM-5 is very, very important. The ICDs, diagnostic tools, that we go and reclassify back, that's very, very important, because those are discoveries over the last 50 years, which is very, very useful, at least to use it as a baseline. But going forward, what would be our classification? And this is where we encourage Muslim psychiatrists, Muslim psychologists, Muslim scholars to find via media, incorporating what is the best from the modern scientific discovery, the best of epigenetics, and the best of understanding of our true nature as a human being. So classification of mental diseases, under that broad definition of mental diseases, every person on this planet is mentally ill. So if you look at the classification of DSM-5 and ICD, we will look at all the signs of mental diseases. Every one of us can be classified with one or another type of mental disease, which is actually ridiculous. That's why now young children are being medicated at a very young age. Even as young as 3 years old, they are being medicated to make them drowsy, to make them like a zombie. Why? Because of this classification that we take, like ADHD or some other kind of behavioral ADHD or bipolar, whatever it is something that becomes so prevalent that anything and everything you give them some chemicals, some pills, put them, shut them off, switch off their brain, then they'll be off no problem. That is not the solution. That is not the Islamic way. That is not the holistic way of resolving the problem. And many scientists, many even psychologists, psychiatrists now are thinking that that approach is actually very, very troubling and very, very, in a way, depressive, because you are killing the potential of that person, that child. Imagine every day of his life, from the age of 3, he's on medication. There will be a point where the chemical imbalance within that medication itself is enough to kill that person, shorten his life, or make him or her more severe in whatever mental episodes that they have, whether it's depressive or whether it is anxiety disorder, ADHD or bipolar and so on. So we have to find a better solution. But since we don't have any better solution now, we will have to do more studies. So, yes, even me, I am not free from the pervasive influence of the old worldview. This is what we call the old worldview. Even the DSM-5 is an old worldview. It's an improvement over the DSM-4 and 3. But it's still an old worldview. The wrong beliefs and influences from the past lead me to think, speak and act wrongly at times. So sometimes we have our own psychological episodes. But that doesn't mean that it's a long-term episodes that make us being classified. For example, we have sometimes quite a long-term episode of anxiety, quite a long-term episodes of depression. But that doesn't mean that we are in any way can be classified as a person who is living with anxiety or living with depression, because these are episodic. But the way this classification is being even drafted, and with all this precaution in DSM-5, is still, in many cases, there's a lot of misdiagnosis and a lot of mistreatment in a way. So we have to be very careful there. If every person in the world is mentally ill to some degree, then what would seem no person should look down upon others as unworthy. So we should not look at those who have mental problems as unworthy, because this could be just transient and it may not be a permanent aspect of their life, provided they go through a process of healing. Most important, the holistic approach of healing from the perspective of our spiritual healing, emotional healing, mental healing and physical healing. And that is the holistic approach that we should encourage, and that is the way of Islam. The wrongness in thoughts, words and deeds is of some is great, and in others is small. No person shall overcome their wrongness to be great or small unless we all work together to bring sanity to the human race. So this is where our worldview that the human race are doing a lot of things that are insane. For example, insane in having nuclear weapons that can blow us 17 times over. Insane of killing each other in the 21st century with all the new weapons. All right, weapons of mass destruction, using robotic soldiers, using drones, killing innocent people just by a press of a button. Those are insane. All right, but these are realities. We are living in a very insane world, because the army industries doesn't care how many millions people are being killed, but as long as they keep going, producing more tanks, more drones, more weapons of mass killing and so on. That is their business. But is it sanely possible to think that business is, right? It is severely wrong and insane. So there are many things. Like for example, promotion of pornography. Everybody and anybody can access pornography through the videos. How are you going to influence the next generation? All the evil deeds, all the perversion that you can ever imagine is there. Open to even to a 3-year-old child who know how to press the right button. So what is going to be the mindset of people growing up in such an environment? It's insane. So you don't expect that child, when he grows up to be a teenager, to have a sane worldview of sex, because he's exposed to the extremities of perversions that you can ever imagine. All right? But this is the dunya in the 21st century. This is the dunya that is creating insanity. So if the society or the civilization is insane, naturally the participant of that civilization, the citizens of that civilization in the 21st century will tend to have the tendency of insanity, whether we like it or not. And what will be the classification? Only Allah knows. So we have to work together to bring sanity to the human race. I don't consider it's useful to have such a detailed classification system for mental illnesses. This is where Professor Mahdi Jenkins doesn't agree that we have this DSM-5 of ICD classification to such a great extent, because the root cause is one. That's his belief. Again, this is our worldview, because from the holistic perspective, our spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical realm are all one. The method of classification leads to the belief that each of the listed categories of mental illnesses is truly separate from the other. If one is a separate form of mental illnesses, then it would also be likely that there are specific origin and cure for each. So each of them will have a specific origin and specific cure. But in reality, it is all the internalization of the interplay of the influences, the environmental influence, the conditioning happening at the level of our existence, at the spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical realm. This is where our point is. So it is one, but you classify them into sub-points, yes, to extend to only to help in diagnosis. But beyond that, everything goes back to these influences that we have explained in the previous video. They might be valuable if they were correct, but they are based on an incorrect understanding of the basic nature of human illnesses. Again, the whole perimeter of defining the basic nature of human illnesses. But the pharmaceutical industries, the pharmacies, the pharmaceutical industries are very good at creating a lot of false hope. A lot of their so-called miracle drugs are no better than placebo effect. All right? A lot of, for example, the drugs that's used for treatment of psychological disorder and mental disorder is no better than placebo. Even is better than placebo, is only about 5 or 10%. So might as well give them sugar pills and that's it. And you tell them this is a powerful drug and that guy get cured. All right? So this is where they've spent billions and billions and billions of dollars, all right, to create something, to make money very fast, and then say, oh, it doesn't work after 10 years, you know, then we have to find another new one. But by that time, they have already made $100 or $200 billion from the people who are using those drugs, suffering the side effects, suffering the disaster of these pharmaceutical industries, using so-called research as a way to con humanity. This is happening, all right? But we have to go back to understanding of the nature of what is the root cause of all diseases, whether it's physical, mental, and where does this root cause come about. And this is where we Muslims have an answer in terms of, as I mentioned, our nature is spiritual. Our existence in this world is temporary. We are a permanent being living in a spiritual, having a spiritual realm, living in a physical world. So we have our dimensions of our roh, dimensions of our heart, our qalb, dimensions of our akal, dimensions of our jasad, but they are one. These are manifestations which existed out of the command of Allah, kun fayakun, it became, and this manifestation is created good, fitrah. So when there is an imbalance, then it will manifest certain diseases, and those are the diseases that we can classify either as physical diseases like cancer or mental diseases like bipolar and so on. So that is our worldview, and that is our challenge to the modern world. So it doesn't mean that we say that we are 100% correct, but this is where we hope Muslim psychologists and psychiatrists can understand the holistic nature of our human self, then go back and have a holistic nature of classification of mental diseases, so that we can understand our role in this world to be a person who live in fitrah, person who live in balance, all right, where our roh, our self, okay, is living in balance, okay, and we have the joy of iman, the joy of happiness, the joy of peace, the joy of mental tranquility, the joy of tranquility of the heart, for only in the remembrance of God can the heart find peace. So those are psychological states, of tranquility, of happiness, in which Allah mentioned in the Quran many, many times. So inshallah, if we can do that, then we can understand that this baseline of whether the DSM-5 or the ICD classification for mental diseases is a good starting point. We don't deny that, but we have to go beyond to understand the intrinsic nature of our existence, that is to be the sincere servant of Allah, to be His Khalifa on this earth, to have ubudiyah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, always striving to make ourselves good, helping others to be good, making the world good, inshallah.